So today we have presentation number 4 regarding topic of Holy Grail by Florian Sydow. So Florian is founding member of Kahumana community and farm located on island of Oahu on Hawaii. Florian served many years as chairman of the Anthroposophical Society in Hawaii. Long-time student of Goethe science and anthroposophy, he is offering presentations and workshops on various spiritual scientific themes. Over 30 years of experience of the design and building of organic architecture, married to Waldorf teacher and father of 3 Waldorf graduate. So today is presentation number 4 of 7. So dear Florian, if you are ready, so I'm passing to you.
Thank you, Andre. I think there's a few people in the waiting room.
Yeah. I just admitted them.
Okay. So welcome and aloha from Hawaii. I know there's folks here and there who aren't graced with the great weather we have here right now. And I think the topic I'm working on has a deep significance, not just from past perspective, but into the present and the future. And that's sort of my goal, is to show that there is this tremendous future ahead that has a lot to do with these Grail mysteries. And Rudolf Steiner played a central role in revealing these Grail mysteries. In one of the earlier lectures, I showed how in his book, Esoteric Science and Outline, or called Science and Outline, towards the end, he referred to spiritual science as the Grail science, and that initiates of the future who are aligned to these new mysteries can be considered Grail initiates. So he himself can be seen as a Grail initiate that overlights our time. And I'd like to then switch to the slides here. If I can get that. So in the previous presentation, I've been trying to show how the Goetheanum can be considered a modern day Grail temple. This is the first Goetheanum, and this particular painting has to do with Goethe's fairy tale, where the bridge over the river that divides the earthly realm from the soul spiritual realm, where the lily dwells. Initially, the green snake is able to build just a fleeting bridge at the midday hour. But through the sacrifice of the snake, this temple that is initially underground is able to rise up to the surface, and there's a celebration of a marriage between the lily and the youth. The youth goes through a kind of death experience, and the snake undergoes sacrifice. And so this has a lot to do with Steiner's whole impulse of adding to the quest for truth the aesthetic and beauty aspect that Goethe highlighted in his life, and that he wove into this fairy tale of the green snake and the lily, which was a later contribution or fruit that he shared. And as I indicated last time, according to Steiner's later indications, it was really this fairy tale, which he was given a copy of by his fatherly friend Schroeder at his 21st birthday, that became the seed, the germinal seed out of which anthroposophy was born, and that he gave his first esoteric lecture in Michaelmas of 1900. So this was the 1899 was the end of the Kali Yuga. So this is really the dawning of a new age of light, which was the theme of my last presentation, even though it doesn't look like an age of light often, with the world wars we had in the 20th century and carrying on to the present, where we have wars going on in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in the Congo, and other parts of the world. So Rudolf Steiner's threefold social order, which has a lot to do with this theme as well, wasn't taken up. And in this fairy tale, there is a fourth king. And this is called the mixed king. He's mixed metals. That's the untransformed human being. When we cross the threshold, the three soul forces divide, and we now need to bring them into harmony on a higher level. And the fourth king represents the self that hasn't crossed the threshold, that at least not consciously, that still combines the three in a manner that is not very stable. And you could say our present world order is an expression of that fourth king. In the story, the will-o'-the-wisps, who represent the scientists, they eat the metals out of this fourth king, and that weakens him to the point where he can't really stand firm without supporting himself somehow. So already then Goethe was showing prophetically that this fourth king, representing the state in a certain respect, that combines the three areas of the spiritual cultural sphere, is pretty much missing. Then there's the rights sphere, where there should be equality, freedom should be there for the spiritual cultural sphere, which includes education. And then there's the economic sphere, where brotherhood should reign. And these were voiced during the French Revolution, which was the time when Goethe penned this fairy tale and published it. So when Rudolf Steiner laid the foundation for this first Goetheanum, and that was on September 20th, 1913, it wasn't announced too much beforehand, and there was a smaller group of attendees, and the weather wasn't cooperating the whole time, but it did clear up so that Rudolf Steiner could speak. And this is just a little excerpt from what he spoke. And I think this is very significant. It was elaborated in the Fifth Gospel series, which Steiner launched into soon thereafter. So on September 20th, 1913, on the occasion of the laying of the foundation stone for the first Christianum, Rudolf Steiner spoke of a fifth gospel and gave as the first revelation of the fifth gospel the primeval macrocosmic world prayer, which is connected with the moon and Jupiter, even as the four gospels are connected with the earth. The prayer sounds thus: Amen. The evils prevail. Witness of unleashing of egohood, incurred through others' selfhood guilt, experienced it in the daily bread, in which heaven's will does not prevail, since man departed from your kingdom and forgot your names, you fathers in the heavens. So later, of course, Jesus Christ created the Our Father, which is a kind of a counterpart to this, which is speaking of the dimension of evil, which humanity will have to face in ever greater measure in the future. So the fourth mystery relating to the earth is the mystery of birth and death, incarnation, excarnation. But the fifth mystery, which comes to expression in our time in an apocalyptic manner, that means it's coming towards us out of the future. Unlike the fourth age of the post-Atlantean period, which was a recapitulation of the Atlantean period, which was the first real Earth period. This fifth age prophetically anticipates the future fifth stage of the Earth, the New Jerusalem, the Golden City, that's described in the Apocalypse. And so when Steiner speaks of this fifth gospel having to do with the moon being the planet of wisdom, and the Jupiter, the future Jupiter, the planet of love, this is really the goal of human evolution, to transform the heritage of wisdom from the old moon into the future planet of love, the future sun earth. And this impulse for the future sun earth was implanted into the earth through the mystery of Golgotha, which involved the six solar Elohim penetrating the interior of the earth and establishing a presence, a kind of throne at the center of the earth. So I wanted to say a little bit about the foundation stone, which was a double dodecahedral foundation stone made out of copper. And the stone was at that kind of ritual event on the 20th of September 1913, was laid in the ground. There was a deep pit that had been dug. There were 9 steps down into where a case that had been prepared, where the stone would be then covered with concrete, and it would sit under a certain part of the building beneath the smaller cupola or dome, the stage area. And there was a special manuscript that was placed in it that was written on skin that Steiner sketched onto it that same day. And the dodecahedron, unlike the other Platonic solids, which were related to the four elements, which played a very important role in the Greek cosmology, that these related to earth, air, water, fire, whereas the dodecahedron related to the etheric universe. And so this foundation stone is then pointing to that future and that future fifth age. So in the middle there, we have the human being standing in the pentagram that's often seen at the top of a Christmas tree. This is the symbol of the higher human being who achieves Atman, the goal of human evolution. And there's a cross that runs through it that has to do with overcoming the lower nature. And we'll say more about that during the course of this presentation. So we can also see how the hexagram, which is sometimes used as a symbol of the Holy Grail, is related to the communion of all of these four elements into one. And that means a union of the heavenly and the earthly, a union of the masculine and feminine, so that this is part of the symbolic language that was very much a part of alchemy in the Middle Ages. Now, Sergei Prokofiev, who originally came from Russia and served on the Vorstand of the Anthroposophical Society starting in 2001. He crossed the threshold in 2014. I had the honor of having him here at our house on several occasions and served as his chauffeur when he visited the islands, and I shared the podium with him at Kahwana, where we gave some presentations many years ago. And he was also very much involved in helping to illuminate these Grail mysteries. So in his first major book, titled Rudolf Steiner and the Founding of the New Mysteries, he speaks about the Grail was taken from the earth and given into the care of certain spiritual beings. In the epoch of Michael, its mysteries were to appear anew on the earth. The new age of Michael began in 1879 at the end of a battle in the heavens that began in the 1841-42 period. And the great dragon was then cast down to the earth. So there's a celebration in the heavens because the dragon who was obstructing the connection between heaven and earth has been cast down. But woe unto the inhabitants of the earth, because the dragon has come down to you and is wroth or angry, because he also knows his time is short. In Rudolf Steiner, the Michael imagination of the Grail became reality. The foundation stone is the true expression of the esoteric being of the Grail. So this is the stone of love, as it's called. And in this foundation, Christmas Foundation meeting, Rudolf Steiner laid this metamorphosed foundation stone into the hearts of those present through the foundation stone meditation. And if you think of this crossing of the threshold that Steiner says we've all collectively undergone unconsciously since the 1840s, the early 1840s, and that this means that the three soul forces separate, but it also happens collectively for the whole of humanity. So there's a kind of separation of the East, which is related to thinking on a higher level, the European middle, which is related to feeling, and the American and Americas, where the will comes to expression. And so these are also then on a macrocosmic collective level undergoing a kind of division, and they need to be harmonized. And this task especially falls on Middle Europe to try to create a balance between East and West. And we can see in the wake of the Cold War, or in the wake of the Second World War, the Cold War pitted East and West, America and Russia, or the Soviet Union at that time. And the European middle was not able to create that balance. Its forces were kind of suppressed, and the war had taken its toll and weakened the impulse there that Rudolf Steiner, among others, had planted. So this has to do with the Grail in general, where Rudolf Steiner tells us, to the degree that humanity is able to absorb knowledge of the Grail in the course of its development, the impulse given through the Christ event can become ever more meaningful. The inner side of Christian evolution will complement the outer more and more. What can be revealed about the higher worlds in relation to the mystery of the Christ through imagination, inspiration, and intuition will more and more permeate human thinking, feeling, and willing. The hidden knowledge of the Grail will be unveiled. It will increasingly pervade every expression of human life as by an inner power. So this is really what we're trying to do with these presentations, is to help to magnify this impulse. And a key role that I sought to bring to expression the last time has to do with the Nathan Jesus being. And we heard from Steiner's lectures on the Gospel of Luke, which highlights this being who's called the Nathan Jesus being. That this being can really be seen as a kind of archetypal Grail vessel. And this has to do with the fact that when the fall of humanity occurred out of the paradisical realm, that there was a danger that the Luciferic influence, which had pervaded the human astral body, could then also pervade the tree of life. And so certain etheric forces, the higher aspect of the tone or chemical, musical ether, as well as the life ether were held back. And this is described as the sister soul of Adam. A part of the Adam being was withdrawn and held within the mother lodge of humanity. And it was through this being who has a deep kinship with humanity that the Christ then was able to give impulses during the course of human evolution when there was a danger of humanity's evolution going off course. The first of these was during the Lemurian epoch, the second in the mid-Atlantean, and the third towards the end of the Atlantean. You can read about this in a lecture titled Pre-Earthly Deeds of Christ. And Valentin Tomberg has written a booklet on the 4 sacrifices of Christ that elaborates on this theme as well. So you have this being serving as a mediator for the Christ being in these pre-Christian period. And he's described as a being who's reached the rank of an archangel, so that he's united himself with an archangelic being. And we'll hear more about that as we go on. So that this means that the fourth of these mediations, the actual mystery of Golgotha, then brings something new. The other 3 were, in a certain respect, recapitulating old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, and now a new impulse was given that has to do with the Earth. And this has to do with penetrating the interior of the Earth, and the Christ then taking up the role of planetary spirit that laid the foundation for the future New Jerusalem. But there's a battle there at the center of the Earth, which is something I'm trying to convey. It's not so easy to make clear. And we're moving towards a future intervention that actually has begun, according to Steiner, in the 1930s. 1933 is especially important in that regard. And because this has to do with the future, where the mystery of evil, the 5th mystery, will grow ever stronger, in his 1924 apocalypse lectures to the priests and Vorstand members, Steiner spoke of how before humanity could witness the second coming of Christ in the etheric, they would first have to meet the beast who rises from the abyss in 1933, which then has to do with the Hitler becoming then the Chancellor of Germany, and for 12 years then playing a role that had a devastating influence on human evolution. And you could say the First World War, where Steiner was still present, the Second World War is really an aftermath of that. That war kind of went underground and reemerged as a hot war during Hitler's reign. So before the Goetheanum was built in Dornau, Switzerland. The intention had been to build it in Munich. And this is a model. You can see that a lot of work went into this. There were years of endeavor to try to create a home for the mystery dramas and for Anthroposophia itself. However, there was opposition to this that reached a point where Steiner started to look for other opportunities. And during a visit to Switzerland, this new opportunity became possible. Now, before going into the next illustration, which has to do with the Grail triptych, which I've touched on before, I wanted to set the stage by speaking a little bit about the paradise myth that's described in Genesis, where you have the god Yahweh, who accepts the offering of Abel and rejects the offering of Cain. And this set the stage or led to Cain slewing Abel. And this has its repercussions down through history. The Abel stream has more to do with the religious human being, the priestly aspect, the divine revelation that can continue after the fall is carried by this priestly stream that also has a kinship with the feminine, as Steiner points out. And this Cain stream really represents the future, but its time hadn't yet come. And so the fact that there is a punishment, sevenfold punishment for anyone killing the sons of Cain, shows that they were meant to be protected for this future task. And Tubal Cain is the pioneer, the father of the smith working with fire and the metals, and also the building of buildings, and eventually through Seth, one of the leading figures in this stream. There's also an Abel stream, Seth, that comes into play. This Cain stream wields the Tau forces, which I spoke of the last time. These were still magical forces that were available to humanity out of the sun mysteries during the Atlantean period. And some of this was carried over into the post-Atlantean period, especially in Ireland. And it plays an important role in Freemasonry, which Steiner worked with. He spoke of the renewal of the royal art, which I touched on the last time. And this has to do with the lost word of the Freemasons. The word in its higher dimension has to do with the logos forces. And the T is also related to the hammer that was used in the ritual work, and of course is used in the smithy, working with metal and fire forces. So I've touched on this Grail triptych, which was originally intended for the Munich Johannesbau or John building. However, for various reasons, it didn't find its place in the building as originally intended. It ended up at some point in Waldorf school in Hamburg. It was destroyed in bombings in 1944, fire, and Margarita Hauschka had been involved in creating she was a niece of the painter Anna May, who had painted this with the indications that Steiner gave. And it was a huge painting, 6 meters wide and about 2.5 meters tall. So it's a very huge painting. It was displayed in various galleries in Munich, including the so-called Glass House, where a description was given by Anna May. And one of the things I wanted to point out is that there was a sort of a very important experience that Rudolf Steiner underwent in his earlier days that had to do with 2 currents of time, one coming out of the past into the present, which one can refer to as the etheric stream. You can get a sense for this with the fact that our memories are housed in our etheric body, and when we cross the threshold, we have a panorama of our past earthly life. So it's the memory body, and there's a cosmic counterpart called the Akashic record. And that's what Rudolf Steiner was able to read in a much clearer way than Blavatsky and other esotericists. So he was able to take us back to the older Earth stages of old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, and the earlier stages of the Earth that were a recapitulation of those stages in very great detail, as described in his Esoteric Science and Outline and many other places. So this left side of the Grail triptych has to do with this memory, the reading of this cosmic memory that led up to and prepared the mystery of Golgotha, which is highlighted in the middle of the painting. And then on the right side, we have what can be referred to as the astral stream, which comes out of the future. This is the prophetic stream. This is the apocalyptic stream. So on the far right, you have the woman who appears in the 12th chapter with the moon beneath her feet, and it's crowned with stars and clothed with the sun, and beneath her, Michael with the dragon beneath his feet. And at the bottom, under the 2 pillars on each side of the center, you have Moses on the left looking back into the past. And he's seeing the burning bush, which is highlighted at the bottom left there. And that was part of his initiation. And if you go to the far left pillar, the pillars are always places in the temporal evolution where an archetype, a time spirit, intervenes. And so back at that time, the time spirit worked through Melchizedek, who is there at the top. Then you have Abraham beneath him, which is hard to see, son Isaac, and then Jacob at the bottom, who has this dream of the ladder to heaven. So this initiatory ladder at the bottom has to do with the old form of initiation. And on the right side, you have the archetype being overlighting the Buddha, who's depicted beneath the archetype. And beneath the Buddha, the Gautama Buddha figure, you have a neophyte with his eyes closed. At that time, in order to achieve initiation, the beginning of the earthly ego had to be suppressed. So it wasn't a fully wakeful experience. So Michael also was involved during that period, but he's called the spirit of the night as opposed to a day spirit. He's the countenance of Yahweh. Yahweh is the seventh Elohim. The seventh Elohim remained behind during the Hyperborean age of the earth, which was a recapitulation of the old sun stage. And during that period, at a certain point, the earth moon separated from the sun sphere, so that the six Elohim who took refuge on the sun needed a faster evolution. And Yahweh, who made a certain sacrifice, remained behind with the earth moon, and later separated the moon from the earth in the Lemurian period, and is then working through the hereditary, the blood stream, which is highlighted on that left side with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and of course Moses helping to reveal these mysteries. And in the middle of that left panel, you have then three figures, the King Solomon on the left in the blue. You have Hiram Abiff, the master builder of the temple, on the right in a more reddish. And this figure in the middle is the Queen of Sheba. She is the personage in whom the world soul incarnated at that time. Saba was a place where the pre-Christian Grail mysteries were celebrated. In an earlier presentation, I spoke of the Phoenix mysteries, which were carried over from Saba to Jerusalem. And they also played a role in Phoenicia, where Hiram had come from. And so even the name Phoenicia includes the allusion to the phoenix being, who in Wolfram von Eschenbach's description of the Grail is a phoenix that rises out of the ashes. It's this overcoming of death. And so this being played a role. This was the Nathan Jesus being that had united with an archangel and actually intervened in the initiatory rites of ancient Egypt and the Hebrew period. And above her head, the Queen of Sheba has a kind of flowering, one could say, a crown chakra that's open to the heavens. And there's the 12, or part of the 12 signs of the zodiac that she's serving. And above her is the Ark of the Covenant. The three of them are actually depicted in the Temple of Solomon precinct. Behind them is the veil of the temple. And you can see, if one can look closer, steps that lead up to the Holy of Holies, where that Ark of the Covenant was hidden from view. Only the high priest once a year would enter that sacred chamber. And I've sought to share in the past that this chamber, which was in the shape of a cube, is a seed of the future New Jerusalem, which also has cubical dimension, and that the veil of that temple, which was four-colored and represents the four elements, was torn at the time of the mystery of Golgotha. So those mysteries that had been hidden were opened up, and everything in that chamber was of gold. And above the Ark of the Covenant were these cherubim whose wingspans span the whole room. And that's where the Yahweh presence was experienced by the Hebrews, which had wandered in a tent structure before they were able to house it in a temple during the time of Solomon. So I gave earlier this strife between Cain and Abel, and that plays a role here in the relationship between Solomon and Hiram. Steiner in one place speaks of how the old moon was ruled by 7 beings who were akin to the Solomon individuality. Solomon's wisdom was a gift of grace. Hiram's wisdom can only be won through transforming the earth, and hence working with fire and the metals and the building of temples, etc. And the Queen of Sheba initially comes to wed Solomon, and there's even an engagement. However, after meeting Hiram and experiencing this future element that he embodies and witnessing the beauty of the temple, she withdraws the ring at a time when Solomon was intoxicated. And this set the stage for a kind of jealousy. And eventually, as described in the temple legend, where some of this is actually coming from, which Rudolf Steiner told on numerous occasions in the esoteric school, and especially in the ritual work from 1906 to 1914. He stopped because of the war breaking out in 1914. So you have this conflict between Cain and Abel that eventually led to 3 evil apprentices killing Hiram. And before that, though, he is on a journey to the interior of the earth and meets his forefather Cain, from whom he, together with Tubal-Cain, receives a new hammer and a golden triangle, which plays an important part in these mysteries. So in the middle panel, you have the mystery of Golgotha itself, and beneath you have Joseph Bar Mathea capturing the blood. It's overflowing into the earth, and beneath the earth you have the 3 mothers who represent old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, a threefold earth soul. And they are then, these mothers, receiving this Christ impulse, which has a transformative effect. And I'll go more into these panels. I would just like to say, on the right side, we have juxtaposed to Moses, we have St. Paul looking into the future and being kind of a forerunner of this vision of Christ in the second coming. And in the center of that panel, you have the initiation of the being who later in the next incarnation will be called Christian Rosenkreuz, who as a young child is brought up by 12 wise individuals who represent 7 of them, the 7 Atlantean stages, and related to the holy rishis, and then 4 who represent the post-Atlantean periods that has to do with ancient India, Persia, Egypto-Chaldean, Babylonian, and then the last figure more representing our own time, who's the more intellectual and forerunner of spiritual science, one could say. So as I said, above each of these pillars are the archetype. They stretch their arms to one another across from the past to the future, And we know that these beings rule in periods of 2,160 years, and that in the left pillar I spoke of the Buddha. On the right you have the John the Evangelist at the top under the archetype, holding the earth globe with a cross upon it, and under him is a neophyte with his eyes open, looking towards the mystery of Golgotha. So Melchizedek can be seen as a pre-Christian forerunner of the Grail mysteries. On the left, you have a image or a sculpture that was in the Chartres Cathedral, where these mysteries were very much at home. And even though beneath him in that pillar on the far left, you have the work of Yahweh, who works from the moon, here by having Melchizedek at the top of that pillar, you can see that these moon mysteries are in the service of the sun mysteries. Melchizedek is a messenger or a mediator of the Manu, as he's called in Eastern wisdom tradition. He's referred to as Noah in the Hebrew tradition. He's the 13th in the lodge of the 12, the mother lodge of humanity. Steiner spoke of the beings of masters of wisdom and harmony of feeling that surround the 13th. So here, focusing on that left panel, I've already said a fair bit about it. You can see a radiation coming from the very top in the middle, where you have a golden triangle representing the Trinity. It passes through the head of the archetype, through the Ark of the Covenant, and through towards the Grail that Melchizedek is holding. And you have another radiation that's going through the ring that is being held by Solomon, and the Queen of Sheba holds this pre-Christian Grail, which has to do with the stone that fell out of the crown of Lucifer in the battle in heaven, that's carved out to become a Grail vessel. Here you have the middle, the renewal of the tree of life. At the top right there, you can see, if one looks closely at maybe a better version of this, you have a kind of crown, this Lucifer's crown, which is fashioned from a serpent biting its tail, the Ouroboros. And within the place where that stone fell, you have an alchemical vase, or alembic, as they were called. And beneath, you have the renewal, the transformation of that fallen stone into this round symbolic expression, geometrically expressed through the pentagram representing the etheric body, the pentagon representing the astral body, the circle around that encompasses them all. You have the circle. And in the very middle, in the midst of the pentagram, you have a downturned pentagon. That's representing the physical body. Steiner speaks of this in the lecture series, The Wonders of the World, and relates it to the Grail mystery. So this is these are all things to meditate on and work with to help awaken the imaginative faculty. There you have the three mothers down below receiving the blood, which is 7 threefold in its expression. The Christ is the ruler of time. The etheric world is a time world, as we've seen, the cosmic memory. But we generally, in our age, are too much stuck in the world of the senses, which convey the world of space. In order to fathom these mysteries, we have to ascend into the world of pure time. And without that, we can't unite with the tree of life, which was removed from human consciousness with the fall and given back to humanity through the agency of the Nathan Jesus, penetrated for 3 1/3 years by the Christ, leading up to the mystery of Golgotha, which renewed the tree of life. And there's deep mysteries having to do with what Steiner referred to as the phantom body, which had been corrupted by the Luciferic influence. This is related to the temple building. So in order to have the human body serve its higher function of being the vessel for the higher ego, it needs to be in alignment with the plan that originated from the Elohim when the Logos first spoke the creation. But due to the Luciferic influence, that archetypal plan model had been corrupted, and this was endangering the whole of human evolution, and it reached a kind of critical point in the Greco-Latin period, and that's when the Christ entered and renewed this phantom body and reestablished its eternal power. And this is also called the resurrection body, in which Christ appeared to the disciples in the upper room, where Thomas was able to touch the wounds. This being could then penetrate through walls and the chamber of his burial crypt. And this is really the resurrection body that was multiplied and is waiting for us in the future, that we will need it when we undergo what's called the first death in the book of Revelation, where the physical body will no longer be available to us, and we will need this new resurrection body that is related to what the gift of the chemical and musical ether could give, along with what Christ poured into that grail vessel. So I've already said a great deal about this. I refer to this as the Holy Spirit panel, the middle being the Son, and the left panel being under the influence of the Father. And Christ in his second coming has to do with this age of the Holy Spirit. He comes through the angels, archangels, archai, and Michael is his countenance, his primary mediator. And anthroposophy is really a gift of Michael that Michael shared in the so-called Michael school that ended in a ritual, a cosmic cultus event that Rudolf Steiner was able to bring down to earth. But Christian Rosenkreuz, who in this initiation undergoes a transformation where this phantom body is, you could say, bestowed upon him. His body becomes like transparent. He dies young. He's then born 100 years later. This is the middle of the 13th century. So he's born about 100 years later. He's then initiated in a way that's described in the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz, which was inspired by Christian Rosenkreuz, mediated by Valentin André, who was a young man at the time. And this is really a what I already shared the last time and a little bit in the announcement, where there's a conversation where then Johanna, Countess von Keyserlingk, says the Grail story, the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz, and the mistress are all aware of this castle. Is it the same sacred building that in the Bible is called the New Jerusalem? Rudolf Steiner, the New Jerusalem of which the Bible speaks is the essential archetypal image of how it will be in the future. The Grail Castle is the image of how it is now in the spiritual world. So also showing how the Book of Revelation has to do with this Grail mystery is expressed through this Rosicrucian seal, the last of the 7 seals. And this has to do with that future Jupiter condition, this future Sun Earth. And at the bottom, you have that cube that I was referencing, having to do with Solomon's Temple. I showed a little picture of that in the top right. Also spoke of how this is related to the salt crystal that has cubical form, and in the alchemical trinity is related to thinking. And on the Sermon of the Mount, Jesus speaks, "Ye are the salt of the earth." We are the thinking of the earth. And Rudolf Steiner epitomizes raising that thinking in his philosophy of freedom, overlighted by Michael and his later work. He's a forerunner of this new cosmic, earthly, human thinking. And unfolding the cube into a cross at the lower right. And the 3 Rosicrucian sayings are in this seal that rise up from below: the ex deo nacimur, the creation of the Father, the crystal cube, sometimes described with water, other time it's like a diamond. And then we have the in Christo morimur in the middle, the redemption of Lucifer, the breath, the word of compassion expresses that, the micro logos that the Christ spoke and Grail initiates seek to learn to wield as the Grail sword. And then you have the Per Spiritum Sanctum Revivissimus. And this is where human beings have something to speak to the stars. And the macrocosmic Grail is there as an inverted chalice to receive it. And the rainbow is a vessel of that sort as well. So the Goetheanum was a metamorphosis, especially of that cubical chamber representing the head of that temple, the middle, where the altar of incense, the 7-branch candelabra and the 12 showbread. That represents the heart and the feeling life of the temple, and the porch where the 2 pillars are, the will, the legs of the temple. And this is expressed in that middle seal with the Yachim and Boaz pillars, which were the names of that entry porch pillars. And here I'm showing the kinship between the Goetheanum architecture and this Holy of Holies in the temple in general. Rudolf Steiner, in that bottom left, shows how the temple entry structure that one can put the pentagon into that architecture, and that represents the future stage of spirit selfhood, the next stage of human evolution. So there you have sort of this architecture that is outwardly related to what the phantom body is meant to be inside. And since the 1840s, all of humanity has been crossing that threshold, ideally between those two pillars of Yachim and Boaz, representing the red and the blue blood, in-breathing, out-breathing, birth and death mysteries. And later on the left, the dragon with 7 horns arises out of the water where the one pillar is stationed, and the 2-horned beast, more Ahrimanic, on the right out of the dry land. These are the 2 tempters on either side. And there's a book open in the hands of this angel that John is asked to take up, and it's sweet as honey in the mouth and bitter in the belly. This is the book that's Michael shared in the Michael school, having to do with the old mysteries that lead over to the new. You have the sun countenance above. And Steiner talked of the cloud body of this being related to the Slavic Russian people, the rainbow to the Middle European people, and the pillars to the Americas and the will people. So you have the thinking people in the East, the feeling people in the middle, and the will people in the Americas. 1 foot on the Pacific, he says, another foot on the Andes Mountains. So you could say where I am here in the Pacific, the East is west of us, as opposed to Europe, where the East is east of the Europeans. So this is the East of the future, where China is rising, Japan. Often the dragon is seen as a positive symbol in China, for example. So I've often been trying to show this relationship between the Grecianum and the head, and where the podium was in the building is where the pineal gland is located in the human head. The cerebrum having to do with the big cupola, the cerebellum with the small cupola. And then if you think of the foundation stone underneath, it would be more in the heart, under the head. And so this has an east-west axis, this building. You enter from the west, and the sculptural group, which shows the new relationship to the mystery of evil as a threefold mystery in the East. Tragically, the building burned before it was placed in its rightful location. And this is the one window that I wanted to draw attention to. It was located in the south. It's, I could call it a rose window. Some would refer to it as pink. And in a lecture series called The Effects of Occult Development, there's a lecture where Steiner speaks of humanity lives within Klingsor's castle of illusion. The human being is enchanted. The Grail preserves the living Christ impulse. The spear that causes the wound becomes the power that heals it. The spear must again be united with the Grail. So in this rose window, you're shown a stage where the the initiate or the neophyte has reached a stage where they're able to see the body from outside. And a typical imagination is that the skull becomes like a castle in which the human being is enchanted and wounded like the Fisher King by this spear that rises out of the blood below. And on the left side of that picture window, there was the words, "I am beholding the building." in the middle of that threefold triptych window, the cosmos builds. And on the right side, the building becomes the human being. This is an interpretation that Steiner gave of this. And so these are just very slight indications of what's given in that lecture that I'm referring to. So I would encourage people who are interested to take the time to read it. And within this, there's an important bridge to what's referred to in the etherization of the blood as the secret related to the pineal gland. The pineal gland can be seen as the Grail vessel, the microcosmic Grail vessel within the human being. And so this is referred to here. A man must develop certain organs for his higher development. To this end, certain concentrations are done in yoga exercise. When a man concentrates on a point between the eyes at the root of the nose with the thought, I am, he develops the organ that we call the two-petaled lotus flower, and that makes him into an eye. But it isn't enough that the organ of the ego is developed in man so that the higher self can stream into him to make him into a higher being. We find the organ for this, where a vertical line from the top of the head crosses a horizontal line through the root of the nose, or a little above it. This organ is the pineal gland. Man makes a connection with the divine self in the world through the pineal gland. So this is from esoteric school presentation that Steiner gave, and there we have the only words written in the first Gurtianum, Ich, the German word for I, and it has the words that relate in German to Jesus Christ being, and it's Faust that is a representative of our age there in that painting. So this is also from the esoteric school, where Steiner initially spoke of the gifts of the three kings that were set before the Christ child by the three kings. And he then goes on to say that in order for the gifts that arise for the future from the past ages of ancient India, the first post-Atlantean age, the Egypto-Chaldean, Babylonian, the second post-Atlantean age, and then, or I should say, after the ancient Indian, we have the Persian, and then we have the Greco-Latin. Then we have the Egypto-Chaldean, Babylonian, followed by the Greco-Latin. So he's saying that each of these ages need a representative who's raised from the dead by the Christ. And for the third Egypto-Chaldean age that is mirrored in our own fifth age, it's the youth of 9. This youth of 9 had been the youth of Sais in Egypt, who tragically died when lifting the veil of Isis, which is a symbol of the decline of the old Egyptian mysteries, where Osiris, related to the Christ as a moon reflection, is now becoming not speaking anymore through Isis. Isis is then called the widow. These initiates are called the sons of the widow. And this being later show becomes Mani and Parsiba. Then Lazarus represents the Persian epoch, and his twin is Zarathustra, who is later called the Master Jesus and is serving as the Solomon Jesus at this same time of the mystery of Golgotha. And then for the ancient Indian, which will metamorphose into the future seventh age, that's the daughter of Jairus. Rudolf Steiner described Mani or Manes as a great messenger of Christ and a spiritual individuality of exceptional rank. According to esoteric tradition, a mighty council of spiritual beings took place a few centuries after the mystery of Golgotha under the leadership of Mani or Manes. A plan was formed through which the wisdom of the bodhisattvas would continue to flow into the future evolution of humanity. This impulse was later carried into the European mysteries of the Rosy Cross, closely connected with the stream where the individualities of Scythianus, Buddha, and Zarathustra, who were revered as great teachers and guardians of the ancient wisdom destined to serve the future of humanity. Steiner emphasized that such accounts should not be understood merely as external history, but as expressions of deeper spiritual realities working behind the course of human evolution. You can read more about that in East in the Light of the West, Chapter 9 by Rudolf Steiner. And here I've kind of drawn a kind of graphic with this, with Mani in the middle of that council, representing the ego, Gautama Buddha, representing the purified astral, which is Manas, Zarathustra, the purified etheric, the ennobled etheric, life spirit, and Scythianus, the spirit man, Atman. And so these are really, for example, the life spirit represents a stage where the ether body no longer dissolves after death. And therefore, these beings who've achieved that level can incarnate rather rapidly. And Christian Rosenkreuz is often incarnated during our period, as was the Master Jesus, who is the reborn Zarathustra. So we have the Mani kind of involved, for example, in the higher mysteries of Rosicrucianism. He presided over the initiation of Christian Rosenkreuz as narrated in The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. He initiated him into the mystery of evil. So the higher mysteries of Rosicrucianism lead over to a deeper understanding of the mystery of evil. So this Rosicrucian impulse eventually flowed into anthroposophy itself. So I was earlier talking about the Cain and Abel, that played a role in the strife between Solomon and Hiram, a jealousy that eventually led to the killing of Hiram by the evil apprentices. Solomon had been told about their plot, but didn't intervene because of that jealousy. So it's a kind of a reversal. Instead of Cain killing Abel, now it's Abel involved in the killing of Cain. So this strife continues into our own time, where Steiner says the backward Cain and Abel streams were responsible for the burning of the Gutianum. So these can be related to certain backward Freemasonic lodges, and then certain members of the esoteric dimension of the Catholic Church, where there is just a embrace of the man Jesus and not recognition of the Christ being. And this raising of Lazarus was among the very last things that Rudolf Steiner spoke of in his lecture activity. It was given on the 28th of September, 1924. That was his very last address. He could go on only for about 20 minutes, and he was hoping to give the second part on Michaelmas Day, the following day, but was too weak to do that. And he then revealed to Ita Wegman and his other physician what he had intended to say. This has to do with the fact that during the initiation, the awakening of Lazarus from the dead, the soul of John the Baptist, who had been beheaded by Herod, which is an anti-grail mystery, the head of John the Baptist on a silver platter. Those are the backward moon forces. And the whole lineage of Herod, including Herodias and Herod the Great, represent this black magical current, these anti-grail forces that also come to expression in Kundry in the Grail story. She's the reborn Herodias, who encouraged her daughter Salome, who did the seductive dance that prompted Herod to promise up to half his kingdom to request the head of John the Baptist. So John the Baptist overlighted the disciples and developed a special affinity to Lazarus John. And through this initiation, this raising from the dead, he gained a new name, John, and became the beloved disciple. And this is really a marriage of the Cain and the Abel stream. Both of the parents of John the Baptist were of the priestly stream. He had appeared as Elijah previously, so he represents the moon current, a Michaelic aspect of the moon mysteries that prepared the way for Christianity. You know that he acted as the baptizer that presided over the descent of the Christ into the body of Jesus in the 30th year. And he had a close connection to the Essene movement. And so you have then, after this union of the two, this Lazarus John reappearing as Christian Rosenkreuz and subsequently as the Count de Saint Germain. And you have the John the Baptist as the Raphael Santi, the great painter of the Renaissance, and then the Novalis individuality, a poet, sage. Each of these lived just a short life. And these two currents flowed into anthroposophy. And one could go into that more, but these two backward Cain and Abel stream, the Jesuits on the one hand, and these backward Freemasons on the other, hated the middle stream more than they hated each other. They made a pact against the middle. Rudolf Steiner divulged in an esoteric lecture, and that led to the burning of the Grecianum, which Steiner attributes to the jealousy of men. as opposed to the burning of Ephesus, the jealousy of the gods. There is a direct relationship between Ephesus and the new Grail Castle, the Goetheanum, the first Goetheanum, which was called the House of the Word. On the first anniversary of that, the Christmas conference, Steiner spoke about the mysteries of Ephesus and that burning having a kinship. That was the jealousy of the gods. Now, in this more recent time, it's the jealousy of men. So the Holy Grail and the higher self. Following the mystery of Golgotha, the transformed sheath of Christ, filled ego of Jesus of Nazareth, were multiplied and preserved for humanity's future evolution. Countless copies of this ego were multiplied and preserved for humanity's future evolution. Countless copies of his ego were preserved for posterity. To safeguard this mystery, a brotherhood of initiates was formed, the Brotherhood of the Holy Grail, later carried forward through the Rosicrucian stream. This mystery points to humanity's eternal spiritual archetype. The Grail, the Rosy Cross, and the higher self reveal one continuous stream, preparing humanity's reunion with the tree of life. Our higher self waits for us in the spiritual world. That's again from an esoteric lesson. There's another esoteric lesson that was given in Munich on December 7th, 1909. Meditation awakens organs in the etheric body. Only when the etheric body has received an impression do the doors open. The sister soul of Adam, preserved from Lucifer, became humanity's higher self. Only when we are united with this higher self are we a whole human being. Through the Nathan Jesus and spiritual economy, this gift became available to humanity. These reproduced etheric bodies are what are waiting for us. The Grail is the soul transformed into a chalice for the higher self. Oh, I should form myself into a chalice that can receive this higher self. Again, it's important to read this whole presentation, which is, of course, fragmentary because people were not allowed to take notes during those esoteric lessons. People had to write down from memory. And in this Gesamtausgabe 266, number 1, it's towards the end of that volume that this lecture is available. So an important part of the whole Grail story, as given by Eschenbach and others, is the wounding of the Fisher King and Fortas. And Steiner goes into this having to do with this Duke Randolph II of Capua is a possible candidate. You have the dance of Salome there on the right, and the head of John the Baptist that she requests related to this theme. You have the suffering Amfortas, the Anty-Grail there in the bottom middle, and the wounding of Amfortas. This sort of has to do with a significant part of that mystery. If it were impossible for the human being to sail into the abyss of evil, it would likewise be impossible for the human being to attain what we call love on the one hand and freedom on the other. This is because for the esotericists, freedom is inseparable from the concept of love. It was the intent of wise providence to give the possibility of freedom to humanity as it developed to evolution, and the only condition for this gift was that the human being freely choose between what is good and what is evil. And from that Grail story, quote, once the king rode all alone to seek adventure far and wide, enjoy love's pleasures on his ride. He went to find his fill of love. This is taken from the lecture series, The Fall of the Spirits of Darkness, lecture 6, given in December 8th, 1917, or that December 3rd. The head bears the transformed moon inheritance. The human being is really a head with only a very insignificant attachment. Lucifer condensed humanity's spiritual body into flesh. The outward manifestation of the Elohim has condensed to become flesh. Our lower nature was actually destined to be our higher nature. Great thoughts are living inspirations flowing through the whole human being. Quote, a thought is given by the gods and flows through the whole human being. Again, this is worth reading. This is just very little indications of what Steiner gave in that lecture. But it has to do with the fact that this is the beginning of the mission of love that was implanted into what became the human lower nature, which was meant to be the human higher nature. The gods, Steiner tells us in various places, were nurtured by human love. It's the nectar and ambrosia of the gods. So if there's a lack of love in the human world, the gods go hungry. So marriage was a way of sanctifying this mystery of sexual love. And there are beings, the azuric beings, which are extremely powerful and coming into our play in our time, who attack through the sexual and invert love instead of turning it upward through this sacramentalization. They turn it downward towards the interior of the earth, and you get sadomasochism, which is gray magic, the beginning of black magic. And Klingsor is a forerunner of those influences. The wound of Amfortas, the nature of this wound would have been, which has been inflicted by the anti-Grail Klingsor forces, is described in the following words. Quote, with a lance well soaked in poison, he was wounded in the fight and never healed from his plight. In his testicle, your uncle felt the deep wound that he was dealt. It was a heathen who fought him so and gave the wound that laid him low. Rudolf Steiner noted that every modern person has this wounded Amfortas within them, which calls for a healing that only our higher Parsival nature and the quest for the Holy Grail can bring to realization. The following statement by Steiner can provide insight into how we are predisposed to the Amfortas syndrome. Quote, now, if we focus on the relationship of the human ego to the metabolic limb system, we find the origin of human egoism in this relationship. The sexual system is indeed a part of this system of human egoism, and the ego primarily penetrates the human being with egoism indirectly through the sexual system. This can be found in Anthroposophical Spiritual Science and Medical Therapy lecture. Forging the Grail sword. When man speaks, what man speaks remains in the Akashic record, is the germinal beginning for the future human being. Speech is one half of the former means of reproduction. Through speech, man propagates himself spiritually. The breaking of the male voice is connected with this. One half of what is sexual has been carried over into speech. The voice is a future organ of reproduction. In ancient Hebrew, the same word was used for sex and speech. Today, man thinks, and the thought passes outward through the larynx. The next stage will be that feeling, warmth, passes outward. The word will be the expression of the inner warmth of the body. Then not only the warmth-imbued word will go forth, but the word will remain, will be given form through the will, which then lives within it. Then, when one utters the word, it becomes an actual being. You can read more of this in the Foundation of Esotericism. This has to do with also the first death that's described in the book of Revelation, where humanity will have to leave the physical body behind, and he will need a helper to achieve that new stage. And this helper is none other than the Christ being, who is the macrocosmic logos. So this has to do with the forging of the Grail sword. Forging the Grail sword, what ails thee? And those who announced the call for the Grail wanted it to sound within the darksome soul already as a dawning of freedom. They did not want to take man's freedom, nor impose something. Man was to ask questions. He was to ask from the depths of his soul being for the miracles of the Grail. Quote, but these disciples of the Grail were especially admonished that they had to ask, that the time of the evolution of mankind had come, where man, if he did not ask questions, if he remained passive, could not come to an experience of selfhood, unless he seeks from within himself the impulse of truth. So this is related to the forging of the Grail sword. So in the lecture series, Occult Movement in the 19th Century, Steiner speaks in the 5th and 6th lecture given in October 1915. He speaks of the mystery of the 8th sphere and how it was misinterpreted by various occultists and identified with the moon. By Sinnett, for example. And Blavatsky didn't really clear that up either, because she had a kind of allergy to Yahweh. So anyways, he says there that the actual moon, which Yahweh helped to separate from the earth when the moon was more in a fluidic state in the recapitulation of the old moon period in the Lemurian period in the middle, that this is actually a protection from the 8th sphere. The 8th sphere has to do with the interior of the earth and the endeavor by Lucifer and Ahriman to create their own kingdom, which is outside of the progressive sevenfold evolution. And so the moon shields humanity from the full forces of the 8th sphere. The moon became the protector of the earth. Without this protection, humanity could not have developed freedom. The future reunion of earth and moon marks a decisive turning point in human evolution. The return of the moon and the spider web. Materialism and the task of anthroposophy. This is a lecture that is worth reading for our time. Lecture 14 in that series on May 13th, I believe, 1921. The moon will again unite with the earth during the 8th millennium. The moon will again unite with the earth. Women will become barren as earthly reproduction comes to an end. And he then talks about how unless humanity has become ready for this transition, which we can describe as the first death I spoke about earlier, with the help of the Christ being, if human beings had neglected to take up this Christ impulse, which brings about a living heart thinking, imaginative thinking, etc., living thinking, then these shadow thoughts, when they're continuing, would become like spider-like beings. And they would weave a web of these thoughts around the entire earth. And human beings who had been captured by these backward beings would have to incarnate in their midst. And you could say the World Wide Web, the internet, is a preview of this. And these spider-like beings can be seen in the search engines, which are sometimes called spiders who crawl the web, or crawlers. And so we really have a beginning of this foreboding future. They will spread their web over the entire earth. And these are beings with evil intent, and they stand between the mineral and the plant. So they're not really reaching this level even of the plant. And artificial intelligence is a preview of what's moving in that direction. And the understanding I would like to share is that the earth in the book of Revelation is described as one great city. But that great city has two auras. One is the subnature aura, and of course, all of these electromagnetic, nuclear forces are in that category. AI, etc., is only made possible with data centers which use those forces. And the so-called cloud is also fashioned from this. But the true Christ comes in the etheric. He cometh in the clouds, not this kind of fallen aspect of the cloud. And he comes in the etheric realm, which is the living etheric aura of the earth. So those who are attuned to that second coming in the etheric are the ones who are helping to build that New Jerusalem. Those who succumb to materialism, which is only in its beginnings, and magnified through this technology, are helping to build the great city of Babylon. And the New Jerusalem is ensouled by the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars, clothed with the sun, that those human beings who are striving a direction look up to as the archetype of their soul. Spirit self, Manas, is a communion with that being who becomes the bride of the Lamb. They're the 144,000 that sing together on Mount Zion the new song. They're the ones who prepare in the sixth age, the age of brotherhood, this future New Jerusalem. And the others are the ones who will then eventually, in the future Jupiter condition, be separated off from the future sun earth as a moon that will circle around that future sun earth, because they will have missed what the Christ gave to the earth, and will live in the midst of the Luciferic and harmonic being as an expression of whatever success they've had with the eighth sphere. And you could say transhumanism, posthumanism is inspired from that quarter. And there's billionaires who are involved in helping this to get off the earth, with spaceships like Elon Musk, who wants to take us to Mars, and Bezos. These are human beings who are standing in front of the present cabinet within the United States, along with other billionaires who are involved in fashioning this web and developing the AI, whether it's the Facebook, Zuckerberg, who's got an underground chamber here on the islands, or others that I've spoken about in the past. So Michael's task is to awaken living spiritual thinking. Before these forces reach maturity, the Grail path transforms thinking into living imaginations. So that's the end of those slides. I thank you once again for your patience.
Okay, thank you so much, dear Florian. So shall we maybe take a short break and then come back with our questions? So what do you think?
Sure.
So let's take maybe 2 minutes to stretch our limbs and for a sip of water, and we will be back in 2. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
sounds good.
It isn't common at all.
Supermarkets have it, and some big shops, but that's all.
Yeah. Yes, you're right, Angela.
Yes.
Okay, dear friends, Florian is back, so we can start. Let's get started. So Richard Hofford.
Yes.
Can
Okay.
can you unveil your face?
The thing is, I'm unable to do it. I'd like to be able to.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
anyway, are these people like Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, are they just plain materialists, or are they people of, tending towards black magic?
Well, I think if you take Steiner's indication that when the Michael school was underway in this whole spiritual world that started around the 16th century and culminated in the transition from the 18th and 19th, beginning of the 19th century, in a cosmic cultus, a ritual that already early on the Ahrimanic beings were aware of this powerful Michaelic influence in the higher worlds that really can be seen as a preparation for what later became anthroposophy on the earth. That the Ahrimanic forces created a counter school, according to Steiner, in the region beneath the surface of the earth. And that this schooling, just like people who incarnated into what later became anthroposophy, had this experience in the Michael school, I would suggest that these leading individuals who are in the foreground when it comes to developing these technologies are people who had participated in this Ahrimanic school. I, for example, have shown in the past that the fact that when these two individuals who developed the Apple computer ended up using the symbol of the apple with a bite out of it as their symbol, or the individual who was the inventor of the electronic computer died through self-poisoning purportedly from biting into a poisoned apple. These are all signs that esotericists can read. And Zuckerberg, for example, with his wanting to create a virtual world, this is a false ascent into a pseudo-spiritual world, a counterfeit world. The outer space adventures, what we really should be doing is lifting the veil of the stars, the veil of the Isis Sophia. Instead, Elon Musk is wanting to have us go physically to Mars, which is a foreign place for our physical bodies. And Bezos is wanting to colonize space with these great wheels, etc. These are sort of, I think, spiritual warfare that's going on. Steiner speaks of how there was a kinship between Christian Rosenkreuz and the Buddha, and that this idea of Buddha going to Mars to bring this peace impulse into a place where there was war. This is an anti-Grail impulse to want to go to Mars with spaceships, etc. And all these satellites around the Earth are interfering with our view of the stars. Elon Musk wants to put 1 million of them up there. Bezos wants to put thousands of them. The Chinese are trying to do something similar. Humanoid robots are going to show up in our living rooms, in our classrooms, in our health institutions, hospitals, etc. They're already doing surgeries and implanting chips. That's, again, an Ahrimanically inspired impulse. And behind it is that the human being has what Steiner called a doppelganger. And it's through the doppelganger that Ahriman especially works. These beings have to leave the human body just before death, but their ideal for the future is to be able to accompany the human being through the transition after death. And this is what these transhumanist inspirations are trying to achieve. They're really a lie, trying to coax human beings into believe that they could become immortal through these devices that can mimic our brains and its electromagnetic neurons, etc. This is really a path for these beings, especially those in America, because they're geographic, these doppelganger beings. And where north-south mountain ranges, they're especially active. That's where Silicon Valley, where a lot of this spread from. The black magic part is more the sexual magic. Hollywood is in that north-south range, just like you've got Bill Gates and his empire as well, one of the early advocates of these things. And Hollywood has its back door, which is San Fernando Valley, where pornography industry really got started. And whereas Herod was seduced by Salome's dance, now one can photograph that dance and spread it across the whole planet because these influences. And so aside from the White House now releasing UFO files, so instead of seeing spiritual beings in the cosmos, they want us to become fascinated with aliens, and science fiction is feeding that trend. But you have this individual whose name appears more and more in the news, who seduced young ladies and really was sort of a gray magician that had a close connection with Mr. Trump before he was president. And these this sexual dimension is the beginning of the Azuric beings, and they are agents of Zorat as well. Zorat is the sun demon, who is the counter force to the Christ. And of course, we have the incarnation of Ahriman pending in our time. And so these are all part of the mystery of evil that we have to face. And so the earth having two auras, the center of the earth is where the macrocosmic counterpart to the pineal gland is, in my view. There's a battle at the center of the earth, just like there's a battle at the pineal gland, until we carve out that hard stone, that initial ego that Lucifer gave us, so that it can become an aura around the head centered in that Grail vessel. Similarly, the earth had an aura that in the past extended out. This was called Shambhala, the fairy tale land of the ancient Indians. It withdrew into the earth, but through the second coming, it's expanding out again. And human beings can unfold this imaginative capacity and begin to see with the inner eye of the heart. So this is a part of that battle at the center of the earth, where the sun demon is trying to usurp the place of the Christ. His number is 666. He's embodied in human beings. The last impulse of 666 was 1898. That's the third and most powerful one. And as Steiner indicated in his last apocalypse cycle, this is the most powerful. And in that same year, Google was founded. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, thank you very much. So Andrew's next.
All right, thank you, Florian. You bring up so much, as you always do, and it's fascinating. There was something you brought up that I would like to help the listeners grasp a little bit more deeply. And you pointed out sexual procreation by the time the 8th millennium will be over. There's a lecture, and I believe it's the 21st, the 13th of May, 1921. I'm not absolutely sure, where he gives the actual date of when sexual procreation will be over, because at that point, the soul will have gone its own route away from the body before the body reaches puberty. So we will never go through puberty. That year is 5700. And so the entire so-called American cultural age will be a time when we will be, who are still here on the earth, will be searching for ways to have a body to be on the earth. And Steiner points out that body will be doing evil, even though there may be a good soul within it. It leads me to believe that what is coming is a necessary part for the separation into good and evil races that have to occur near the end of that 7th cultural age and just before the time the moon returns. That separation is spoken of in 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, where he talks about the need to not love the earth. We cannot form heaven on earth. That so it says to me, in the sense that this transhumanism and all that we are seeing today actually does have a role, as bad as it is, as full of evil as it is. Even Ahriman has a role. And we've got to allow that role to occur, but we've got to find the counterbalances that allow us to proceed in the course of evolution that the divine spirits have foreseen for us to go. So I think that's, for me, I wanted to add that. But thank you very much, Florian, for the immense amount of wisdom that you've given us today.
I just wanted to comment on that. I think this is sort of a controversial area for some. I previously gave a series of 12 lectures or presentations over a long period of time on the Book of Revelation. And in the Nuremberg cycle from 1908, the idea is that the post-Atlantean periods and their unfolding 1 through 7 are related to the 7 letters that are described at the beginning of the Book of Revelation, that arise from the being who has a sword coming out of his mouth, who is surrounded by 7 candlesticks and who has the 7 stars in his right hand. And that means he rules over time. If you look at the 7 stars in the Rosicrucian picture, it has the evolutionary sequence. And the 6th age is considered in the spiritual scientific view as the ripe fruit of this whole post-Atlantean sequence. Just like in the Atlantean time, it was the 5th and the 6th and 7th were considered
Correct.
overripe. And so those overripe didn't add new, they hearkened back to preserving the past in a certain respect. There's something similar, only now we're not in the descending phase of Earth evolution, we're in the ascending. So the mystery of evil is in the foreground in a way now where Ahriman and the Azurus are playing a role as opposed to more Luciferic influences in the descending phase. And those Ahrimanic are much more dangerous. So the second half of Earth evolution, the Earth is dying. And so we're loosening our connection to the physical Earth as part of that dying process. Right. You can't imagine a kind of a hard moon like we have now in the heavens uniting with the Earth without turning it into a total disaster. So you have a situation where in that in the various places where Steiner speaks of that 6th age, which is the Philadelphia age, the age of brotherhood, it's called the Aquarian age, the Sophian age. The Gospel of John is described as a Sophian gospel by Steiner. And he at one point says in America, there is a tendency to not to want to leave the Earth in the male side of the population, and that the apes have some of this in their own characteristic, and that leads a part of their being to become group souls after death, and that the women are the ones that will carry the American evolution into the future. In the past, it was male incarnations that were more important. In the future, female incarnation will become ever more important. And you could see how Steiner gathered around him Ita Wegman, Rita, Marie Steiner, etc., who he placed in important roles. Like Ita Wegman, the first class, Marie Steiner was going to take over the second class of the School of Spiritual Science. And in a certain lecture I could share with you, he speaks of how the souls who are ripe at the end of the 6th age, you just mentioned the time frame earlier. I think that begins around 3,500 or something, that age, and it's 2,160 years. So that would be, what, 5,700 or something, like I was saying.
Yeah.
So you have a point where the Slavic Russian people are especially prepared to be the ones who lead that transition into this new stage of evolution where human beings will have an etheric body as their lowest member.
Right.
And that he says that human beings won't be able to make that transition on their own. They will need a helper, and that's the Christ. Later, he talks about the second death, where there's a transition where the astral will be the lowest. And there again, the Christ will help, because human beings won't be able to achieve this logos impulse of procreation until the Vulcan stage fully. So they need the helpers in the meantime. But he
Right.
says in a certain lecture that those who aren't able to make that transition in that period around 5700 will generate animalized human beings
Mhm.
during this American seventh age, which lasts through to the War of All Against All, which is the end of this post-Atlantean period. And in the series of lectures, I believe it's the one temple legend where he says that the earth at that future time will be turned into a huge electric kind of vibrating body of sorts, and that he couldn't reveal how those human beings would be saved that carry over and help to launch the sixth great epoch of the earth, which in the book of Revelation is called the seven seals in the cycle in Nuremberg. And it begins with the horsemen, etc. But this, he says in various places that this seventh age will not add anything new and
Right.
fruitful, so to speak. So there will be, I agree that Ahriman plays an important role, just like you can't have the Faust drama without Mephistopheles. You need that one quote where he talks about we couldn't have freedom and love unless we could also sink down into the abyss of evil. So we need Ahriman to have a physical body. And the ego is really, as was described in this pineal center, where a mineral substance is formed within the head. And he says in another place that that's where the ego needs this mineral substance. And of course, Ahriman rules the mineral world. He is the Lord of Death. That's his rightful place in human evolution. So it's by kind of dealing with Ahriman, who and ultimately Lucifer is redeemed and gives rise to the Pentecost event. Ahriman resists that much more so. And it's only really in the next phase after Jupiter into the Venus stage where the Ahrimanic forces can more fully be redeemed. But the task all along for those who have achieved this higher state is to take on the Manichaean role of helping those who become captured in this web or in that moon that will circle the future Jupiter, to help them to find their way back to the sun evolution that the Christ is bringing to the earth, and that will shine in that future golden city. And so it's a complicated theme, this mystery of evil.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a very challenging and important one. I would encourage participants to participate in the upcoming Mystech conference, where some of these themes will be dealt with. It's coming up soon.
It sure is. Yeah, it's so interesting talking with you, because you stimulate so many thoughts all at once, but you brought up the doppelganger, or the Ahrimanic double, and for years I wondered, what is our responsibility to this double, since it lives in our physical body through our whole lives? Why if we have the same one every time? Are we developing some kind of bond to this being? And then what did this being want in order to be brought into human evolution? And Steiner does indicate, he said they wanted bodies with which they could conquer the earth. And I find it fascinating that the spidery beings that you mentioned, I think that is the Ahrimanic double. When they take over our bodies, when we ascend, they will cover the earth in this electronic web. That will be their body. And then, it all comes to an end when the moon returns. But they get a moment to conquer the earth, and then evolution goes on.
Yeah, I think I think it's the 5th or 6th lecture in the Mission of Michael, Steiner speaks of how on the second half of the old moon evolution, where the angels were going through their human stage,
Right.
and they were using the human astral and whatever was there of the physical in that time, which was more fluidic, to achieve their human stage, that we, who were part of their evolution back then, were having a disturbing effect in the
Right.
second half of that evolution. He said something similar is happening in the second half of Earth evolution. The beings who will reach the human stage in the Jupiter condition are there within our unconscious. I see this as the doppelganger, and that they are disturbing our evolution since especially the middle of the Atlantean, when the death forces started to play more of a role. And of course, these are geographic beings. So there's Luciferic doubles, there's Ahrimanic doubles, and every variation in between. With the North-South mountain ranges, I was speaking more of the Ahrimanic, but in the Asian regions and China, etc., you'd have more of the Luciferic version, although America has been exporting its technology all over the planet. And the more we use these electromagnetic forces and magnify them, the more we have them in our cities all across the whole planet. But I think America is especially a region where these forces are more dangerous, because the Ahriman leads over to the Azuric beings, which involve atomic forces, which are forces that will bring about the death of the earth prematurely the more we use them. And that means many human beings won't be ready for that transition. And right now, to feed these data centers, they're talking about reviving the nuclear approach to generating. And so we have to see, I think, that nuclear is just the very primitive beginning of the misuse of these fallen etheric forces, where you could say on the elemental table, you have the lightest elements and the heaviest elements are like the keys on a musical scale that we're kind of playing like kids on a piano without realizing what we're dealing with. So when we deal with fusion and fission material, we create plutonium, etc., which a lot of what the war is supposed to be about in Iran right now. What are they going to do with these nuclear fissionable material? And that's sort of a danger in the near future, is that we only had a small introduction in the dropping of atomic bombs in Japan Nagasaki and the like. But the arsenals are growing, military budgets are increasing, and the tension between China and America as rivals is very powerful. And Europe has trouble playing its role. Anthroposophy is weak. So what is the antidote to these forces and all this AI? We need this living thinking, this aura around the earth. But a lot of these technologies are kind of usurping that by creating a counterfeit, I think. So yes, there is a role for these beings. Ideally, we would redeem and work in a redemptive Manichaean way on the doppelganger, because those will be the more positive version of the human stage on the Jupiter condition.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. George is next.
Yeah, just a couple of points to add here. First of all, of course, with regard to mystery and evil, Aristotle said in order to know something, you have to know its opposite. To know what it is to be brave, you have to know what it is to be a coward. To know what it is to love, you have to know what hate is. And in terms of what we've been talking about from a biblical point of view, St. Paul in one of the epistles asks the Christ to remove this thorn in his side, this thorn which is Aramanic, Luciferic, or Azuric, we could imagine. It's the thorn that causes him to sin. And the Christ replies, I will not remove it. He asks them again to remove this thorn. It's always 3 times, isn't it? And the Christ replies, I will not remove it. The 3rd time he asks, the Christ replies, I will not remove it because I am made the greater by its presence. The function of evil. And of course, in the temptation scene where Christ overcomes Lucifer and Satan, or Araman, in the Gospel of Luke, he overcomes them at that point in time, but he doesn't get rid of them. Because it says in the gospel, and they left him for a season. He didn't destroy them as far as he was concerned. He, she, it. And Rudolf Steiner says that in order to know the Christ, you have to know Satan. And that's why we shy away from the Christ deeply in our subconscious or unconscious. In order to know the Christ, you have to know Satan. Otherwise, how are you going to tell a wolf in sheep's clothing? And lastly, just with regard to the question of infertility in the future and reproduction changing, the Christ actually says that woe unto those who give birth and suckle in those days. So it's quite interesting, just from the biblical point of view, that the things we've been talking about, this mystery of evil and good, is present in the Bible. And of course, you've got the book of Job, haven't you, where Yahweh Elohim and Satan get together with his angels to torment Job.
Yeah, that's how the higher nature arises. It's like the Grail theme where we have the Amfortas isn't somebody out there. Steiner says each one of us has that within us. And this has to do with the fact that the forces of former clairvoyance disappeared, and that reached a certain culmination in the Greco-Latin period. And that that's when the corruption of this phantom was most critical. And that's when, in the picture of the horseman, Steiner indicated that the 4th horseman, whose rider is death and hell follows after him, for our consciousness soul time has to do with that Greco-Latin time. And that's when thinking descended below a certain boundary into this spectral world that this pale horse represents. And it was the Arab stream taking Aristotelian's impulse and translating it, and it becoming available in Gundi Shapur, for example, and the wise teachers of the Platonic Academy getting pushed out by the early church fathers and taking refuge in Gundi Shapur. And the same thing happened in Persia, where certain initiates were kind of forced to leave and they gathered there. So it's often these very high developed individuals who have to deal with this mystery of evil on behalf of humanity. And if you'd use the asceticism route, which was sort of the way that was in the foreground often in the early medieval period, then your tendency is to become, you can avoid Ahriman and end up in the clutches of Lucifer. That's why the threefold mystery of good and evil is so important for our time, that the Christ is really the balance. He doesn't destroy these forces of evil. That bottom of the sculpture, he describes how Ahriman actually kind of binds himself in a certain respect. And the Lucifer falls, part of Lucifer falls. And I think the fact that Lucifer, the redeemed Lucifer, becomes the fire of the Holy Spirit at the Pentecost event shows how this transformation of evil, it becomes a great benefit and benefactor of humanity. And the Ahrimanic transformation will be necessary in order to achieve Atman, the body temple, the highest stage of reunion with the Father God. And in order to create an ether body that doesn't dissolve at death like the initiates, as our forerunners do now, requires that subduing of Ahriman. So when you see Michael with the dragon, the understanding is that he's not looking at the dragon. He's feeling him with his will down there, and he's not killing him, but he has him on a leash, so to speak. And Steiner says with the Mithras, which was often shown on the bull with a dagger slaying the bull, he says that that's more the aesthetic version of the past, that now we have to redeem that bull, which belonged to that Taurus period, the Egyptian Chaldean period, which we're in a certain extent reflecting in our age.
Thank you, Florian. Well, I mean, can I offer some statement? So I have a feeling we always thinking we are always existing outside of adversarial forces, which is kind of illusion. So in fact, we are so deeply involved in the process, and in fact, we are adversarial forces to highest degree. So I mean, it's like speaking to Andrew, so this is descending of, if you remember, descending of spirit of darkness, because all our discoveries in area of economy and technology, it's actually inspiration of Ahrimanic beings, Ahrimanic angels, which are since 1879 are circulating in our blood system, inside of our blood system. So we can say we are, in fact, making discoveries because they are main inspirers. So, and of course, a cosmic intelligence. So, I mean, if you remember lecture 11 from karmic cycle, it's a third value. So finally, Steiner, I remember this illustration of Friedrich Nietzsche. So that cosmic intelligence, in fact, this is a group of angelic beings which were separated from Michaeli kingdom. So they are rebellious, in fact. So, and we are dealing with in an area of thinking, an area of our intelligence, personal intelligence. We're dealing with group or individual adversarial angelic beings which are harmonically oriented. And as soon as we are relaxing, so they are making our thinking sexual and materialistic. So this was happened with Friedrich Nietzsche. So because I mean he excarnated and adversarial angels took over. That's why he got all this last essays, which is Antichrist and Ecce Homo. So we are to highest degree involved in all this process. We are pretty much adversarial, except a little part. So and not too long ago, we've been studying. So Amber is here. Hi. We've been studying individual folk souls, which is to me like a highly practical course. So, and it's a very interesting statement because we have fallen spirit of time, which is in fact not archetype, but spirit of form. So much more powerful and real one, which is of course Michael. So, but Michael approaching to us from outside through designing certain situations when we are we're realizing we can make, for example, accidental discoveries. So because of proper spirit of time, but a fallen spirit of time speaks inside of us. He speaks inside of us. So our thinking, actually, when we think, okay, I have to think about it. So be prepared. So a fallen spirit of time will speak in the form of your own inner ideas. So, in fact, like I've been speaking with Terry Borman not too long ago, and and he said that's why conversation is so important, because when I'm talking to you or you talking to me, so you're having something which is coming from outside. So, but not from inside, because a role of fallen spirit of time, this is set to set type of thinking which is relates to our time, and type of thinking which relates to our time. General, this is materialism, but materialism doesn't work for us, right?
Materialism kind of set the stage for human freedom. So
Exactly.
modern science really helped to usher in a period that kind of cut the old puppet strings of the gods that formerly controlled human beings from above. Michael let go of human or cosmic intelligence beginning in the 4th century, according to Steiner, and kind of coming down to the earth in the scholastic period when Aquinas was there to receive it, among others. And that the Francis Bacon, who was the father of modern science later, was a reincarnated Harun al-Rashid from Gundi Shapur, or the time of Gundi Shapur that found its way into Arab culture. And this was allowed to happen because it was necessary for the consciousness soul to be ushered in, that humanity went through a period of materialism that was really inspired by these Ahrimanic forces to a large degree. And was in this battle with the dragon that they were cast down. And now they're not up there, they're in our earthly realm, inspiring nationalism, racism, blood relationship at a time when we're called to develop a new kind of community, not based on blood. But I'm not advocating when I speak about technology of avoiding these things. Obviously, I'm on this medium here, which is facilitated by having a laptop and a camera and getting to know these forces. And so I think otherwise we'd be like the Essenes who kind of try to push the evil out, but then we betray the young people who are brought up with this medium. And many of them are on their own seeing the dangers, but they need help from wise elders. And can we find the language to reach them is a question. Because we're kind of at a disadvantage because there was many failures among those that Rudolf Steiner was counting on. He died prematurely. The Vorstand broke up and the society splintered. And so we need to do everything we can to make up for the weak culmination that Steiner was hoping for, to be stronger. And so we can ask, well, where is the Platonic, the Aristotelian coming together? And I think this beloved disciple has a certain key and secret of the two Johns that is needed for our time, so that the Anty-Grail has very much to do with this backward Cain and Abel, that the two Johns heal. And so that is a way of finding the middle between these adversarial forces who destroyed the Goetheanum, the Grail building of our time.
Yeah. Well, how we will come together. So you can join a group of Ari Torison, for example, because they are typical shepherds. So I mean, and it will be probably a very positive step. So, but see, I mean, how important to be awake. I mean, so it's spiritual science, and everything what Steiner gave to us. It's so super important. It's pretty much roadmap for fifth cultural epoch, and people are not awake. So I think it's super important to know. I mean, who is thinking for us, and who is giving us ideas, like certain ideas. So it can be really beginning of the process. Okay, Anthony.
Just a small thing. Okay. Thinking of the situation with AI, I listened to a program this morning that by an expert who has been following AI. He has a company that has been on top of things and understands the development of AI. And it's quite amazing what he said in relation to AI developing its intelligence, how quickly that is happening now, that the AI systems are actually, in no time at all, are almost doubling the possibility of developing the information, giving you the answers, et cetera, et cetera. And then I I happened to look up the Apple computer. We were talking about Apple earlier. And when that was made, that was exactly 50 years ago this month. It was released. The first Apple motherboard, as they called it, the motherboard. And do you know the price of the motherboard? It was $666.66. And that's not by mistake. We know that. But just to show how that idea of Ahriman and had already been used to develop it. Just thought I would mention that because I think this has become a real problem, and this is where humanity is not waking up quickly enough. The controls that are coming in, and the the loss of the freedom that humanity has now, which is rapidly being stolen from humanity. The idea has not really come to the fore of even beginning to understand what's happening around us.
Yeah, I think that just like the 666, $666.66 goes together with that bite out of the apple that I spoke of earlier with regards to that development. For people with an esoteric sense can see a kind of an occult factor coming through, and that's what is the signature of this Ahrimanic sub-earthly school that one can see, like I mentioned, 1998 being the year when Google was founded. And the two founders of Google are multi-billionaires, among the richest people on the planet. And there was kind of a conversation between Elon Musk and one of these founders regarding the future. And he was feeling that Elon Musk was kind of with his idea of the brain computer interface device, etc., and trying to sort of continue the human being, that he was kind of defending the flesh and blood human being. And this particular individual, as a founder of Google, is like a post-humanist who believes we're just helping to prepare a superior silicon-based entity for the future, and that those will be our mind children, so to speak, as some people call them. And so there is a great danger that we have to wake up to. And I think where two or three are gathered, we can create these little grail circles where we can find answers and begin in our own little ways to cultivate this living heart thinking that's needed to prepare the phoenix that can rise out of the ashes, because this fourth king presupposes, and you can see the signature in the world of the modern economy with the $39 trillion debt or $40 trillion debt in the US and debt on other nations. The economy is going to crash. The AI is seen as a bubble. And I don't think it's a far-fetched prophecy to expect that to happen. And that will bring about some setbacks, like happened in the year 2000, where the dot-com bubble burst. And there were some survivors who made it, but a lot of the economy kind of collapsed. And so I think we're in that kind of a phase economically where we need brotherhood, but we have this greed factor of these billionaires kind of wanting more, not being satisfied with 1 million or 10 million or 100 million. They need more billions. And at the meantime, you've got then all these homeless people who are on the street, and there's not any real compassion that we should be having in our society to reach out and make it possible for these people to be integrated into society. And so a lot of them are self-medicating with drugs or self-destructing with alcohol. And so the future looks bleak for a lot of these people. And so we need to find ways of entering this Manichaean stream, which involves redeeming evil. And finding a positive outlook into the future. And for that, we need the Grail mysteries in their modern form.
Okay, so let's take maybe last from George, last question.
Just a quick point here to do with the apple. In Latin, apple is malum, but it also has a double meaning because it can mean evil as well. In Latin, malum means apple and it means evil, which is perhaps why we think of the fruit from the tree of knowledge being an apple. And the bite out the apple is the bite out of evil, in Latin anyway.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you, George.
Thank you.
So, dear friends, I think it's time to say goodbye, and because it's midnight in Central Europe already, and I think it's 11 p.m. in London. Yes. So, all our presentations are recorded, and this particular presentation will appear on Threefold Mankind YouTube channel. So, yeah, I'm not affiliated with Rudolf Steiner branch since 2024 February. So it's separate, independent, international platform. So, dear Florian, thank you so much for your presentation, and we're looking forward for next. It's totally 7. Yeah, that's what you promised. So, dear friends, please say thank you, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Florian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hmm.